Hello there, my fellow tree lovers. Welcome back to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. Your host, Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu. If you didn't know that, then welcome to the podcast. It's in its fifth season. This is episode 44 for year 2023. Cracking along, doing great, and I really appreciate everybody listening in. The season is upon us. Well, almost. It's a good time of year. It's an extremely stressful time of year in many ways, more than just one for bonsai. But it's a beauty, and I think that being prepared is always the best that we can possibly manage with our bonsai and how we look after them, and to get us through this crazy time of distraction and weather extremes. You know, I was looking at the news this morning. We've got bushfire warnings in one part of the country. We've got flood warnings in another. I've got cyclone warning in another section of the country. And here in downtown Melbourne, we've got mid-30s with thunderstorms. So very hot and humid, which is unusual for us. We normally get the cold and we get the hot. We don't normally get as much of the humid, although last couple of summers we have. So things are changing. And being on guard and prepared for it, I suppose, is best. And, you know, what do they say? Welcome to summer in Australia. No matter where you are, you're going to get flogged. So yeah, it's really definitely something we've got to be prepared for. And, you know, I think that for me, I look at my watering system, and I talk about this a lot. And part of today's podcast is going to talk about a tale with not my watering system, but someone else's. And I've looked at a few areas of mine, and I've said it before in podcasts. I'm ready. I'm done. I've finished everything. I've updated it. And I was just having a chat around the kitchen bench yesterday, and I got asked, "What are you looking at out there?" And I said, well, that part of the watering system, I'm going to update it. It needs a bigger line. It needs different sprays. It needs this. It needs that. So even though I think I'm done, I'm really happy with things. Things need to be amended and changed again. So here we go. Same old story. Anyway, strap yourselves in. This is going to be an interesting podcast. I want to talk about a few things about, we've bring a few key things that we've talked about before, patience, timing, all that sort of stuff to tell you a tale of a tree. So stick around. It's going to be a good one. With bonsai, there's a feeling, a very real feeling that's it's hard to go away. It's hard to get time away from your trees. And you're probably listening to this podcast saying, yeah, it's hard enough just going to work, let alone planning, let's say, a 3-month trip away, leaving your trees in your yard. And I want to tell you a tale. It's a far too common and frequently repeated tale that I really don't like hearing and I don't like telling. But it's worthwhile at this time of the year, because as we get into summer in Australia, or anywhere around the world really, you've got to be able to have a break from your trees. You have to build in systems or factors that you can bring on board, like someone to care for your trees, to allow you to live life. Otherwise, what starts or what is probably one of the most enjoyable things in your life becomes a burden, and that's the last thing that I think it should be. I think it should be something that you spring out of bed for, to get down there and see your trees and have a look at them and spend time with them. And I was talking to people the other day, and someone was going on about how much they love the spring colour, like that foliage is and it sticks with them, and you can tell they get that glint in their eye where they're like, oh, when it first bursts bud, it's the best time of the year, and it does this and it does that, and it's like, yeah, that's you've got the love, you've got that bonsai love deep in your heart. So this tale that I want to tell, and it's not talking out of school because it is something that gets repeated. It's a story that I heard recently in the workshop where a big once-in-a-lifetime trip had been planned to go away, and for a very long period, so 3 months. That's a really long time to be away from the trees. They'd planned. They had allocated time and resources. They'd put in a watering system. They had 2 different controllers in place, battery-powered as well as linked to power, and controlling 2 different sections of the yard. They had a redundancy plan put in place that if one sprinkler head didn't work, the other one would pick it up, and blah, blah, blah. And from what I understand, there's a hell of a lot of trees in this yard, hundreds and hundreds, all at different stages. So, they may not necessarily be, when I talk about the quantities that have been affected a little bit later in the podcast, and you can see where this is going to head to. I'm not talking about, necessarily bonsais in pots. It could be that they're stock that they've collected or that they've grown from seed, or their cuttings that they've raised and whatever. Anyway, so to paint this scenario, the yard's full of trees. They've got 12-week trip booked. They've gone and done their homework. They've sourced what they believe to be the right controllers for their watering system, and they've put it all in place. They've taken some of their more special trees, a handful, a smaller number, to a bonsai friend's place to be cared for, to give them the TLC. But the rest, they believe, and there's other plants in this yard as well. Lots of different types of trees that aren't necessarily bonsai. Anyway, so they're plant lovers, and tree loving is just part of what they do. Put it all in place, go away 3 months. And from what I understand, very quickly into the 3-month trip, one of the controllers fails. Even though it's on battery and it's on power backup, it fails. So one whole section of the yard, which is hundreds of trees, dies because the controller stops working. And this is the most common thing I hear about the controllers that come from major hardware outlets that are generic, that are sold, not at a professional standard. They're more, to be used once or twice here or there. They still have a decent price tag on them, don't get me wrong, but they're not quite the price tag of the high quality units. And I was having a chat to this person, and the thought was going through my head, I know it was cheaper, the controller. I still know it's a good controller. Like they haven't gone and spent $20. Like it's not something like that. They've spent good money on this controller, but not the amount that they probably should have for the higher end unit. Because it's always that extra $200-300 on top of that amount. But you break it back, and looking back in hindsight, which is lovely, it's always easy to do. What are those? What's the trees that died? And all the stories, all the memories, all the history, all the work that's gone into them, losing all that in that short period of time, what's that worth? Is it worth that couple $100? Is it worth the better controller to make sure it works? And it's also timely for me to reiterate, I suppose, that one of the critical keys to the success of an automated watering system, which is your ticket to freedom, really. It's an automated watering system is your ability to go to work when it's 45 degrees and not take a sickie, or, to have a holiday with the family and get to the beach, or, go up into a mountain and go hiking and get out of the routine that you have every single day. And one of those things is a camera system to be able to, have a quick look. It says it's running. Is it running? How do I know my system is going to turn on at 10 o'clock in the morning if I can't actually see it? And subsequent to that too is maybe, if a couple of days is a long time when it's really hot to maybe not have a watering system work. But would it be wise to have someone actually pop around once every couple of days, or a neighbour stick their head over the fence? Is it working? Can you see that if anything's starting to dry out, especially if one whole section of your yard is turning brown and the other one's nice and lush and green, it just does my head in. This is a common story that I hear all the time, and I push a certain quality of control. I'm not endorsed. I'm not sponsored by anybody, but I know what works for me, and it's been really reliable for me that I can have weekends away. I can go surfing when it's hot. I can go on bonsai trips around the country and see people and be away for weeks at a time, and know that I've got that reliability of a system that's gonna back me up and do its job. Which is all I expect. Just turn on, water, turn off. That's all I want you to do. It's really, really simple. And so this poor bonsai lover, this tree lover, has got to go through this heartache, and it was so disappointing seeing her broken heart that it's like, oh my God, I wish I could turn back time and change things for you just that little bit. Just when you're paying for these systems, just to say, hey, look, this is a better way to go. I know it's going to cost you a few bucks more, but if you had your crystal ball and you could see into the future and knew that this system was going to let you down, would you have gone for that slightly better one? And the answer is invariably yes. But like I said, it's a common tale that I hear, and I want to compare that story where you've had that catastrophic failure of a substandard controller. That system that didn't work, didn't do its job, didn't do what it was paid for. Yeah, sure, you can get it changed over under warranty. You can get your money back, whatever. Does that fix things? I don't think so. And I want to compare that story to another one where, another one of my bonsai customers went away, had a 5-week trip away overseas, living life, put in the controller that I talked about, spent the money. We had the conversations a while ago about why it's better than the cheaper ones and, don't get burned on this, do the right thing. They put in the redundancy lines, to make sure that one line would pick up another if something went wrong, get a camera system in place, put the camera system in place, made sure that it worked, had people keeping an eye on the yard as well on the odd occasion. Comes back, pops into the workshop, having a yak. How was the holiday? Fantastic. How are the trees? My God, they have not looked better. And it's like, yes, how good is that? That I think you soon forget the value of a controller when you can do these things and create memories with, he was visiting his family overseas and seeing his grandkids and whatever and that sort of stuff. You can't put a price on that. And to come home and know that everything's okay and that next time, a trip's being planned, it's like, yep, with reassurance, I know that I've got the system in place now and I can do it. Yeah, sure, there's, like I said earlier, there's upgrades to the system you're going to be doing. I've conceded I don't think I'm ever going to stop upgrading my watering system ever, absolutely ever. But, I know that with the right technology in place and the right systems in place, you can live life. You're not chained to your trees that you can't leave the comfort of your home because you've got to sit there and make sure these things get watered. And as I was saying, open up the podcast with the extremes that we've got of rain and heat and whatever. You need to be able to flex with your system as well. And these automated systems are great, but they're automatic. One of the big changes that I've made lately with mine is to have the ability to turn it off. For instance, with these thunderstorms today and the heat and the humidity, I know the pots aren't going to dry out, the trees aren't going to take up the moisture that's available to them at all, and decandling's in place, which is, next cab off the rank for the podcast, but I know that the pines are starting to slow down. So if I keep pummeling this water into them on an automatic basis saying, yep, keep water, then I know it's going to do some damage to the trees. So if I can stay on top of everything and monitor things through cameras, if I look at the weather patterns, if I look at the daily news for home, if I check the rain forecast, check the actual rainfall as well, then this automated system that I've got, I can turn it off and on as I need to. My watch that I wear, I've got about half a dozen alarms that go off throughout the day to say, hey, it's whatever time it is. That means you need to think about your first watering of the day. If it's an automated system, check it, make sure it's running. If it's not, do you need to do a bit of research now? Spend a couple of minutes on your stupid device and have a look and see what the world's doing in your microclimate at that point in time. Do you need to water? Do you need to put some thought into your trees if you can't be there? If I'm away from my trees for whatever reason, working, customers, shopping, holiday, whatever it is, if you're not with your trees, then I use this alarm system throughout the day to remind me, to bring my attention back and say, there's something more important than you, buddy, and you need to focus on it. And it always comes back to watering the trees. So the all too common tale of, spend that little bit more, get proper advice. Don't go to a best advice I can give you. Don't go to a hardware store to buy generic controllers because, it's one of these things that you get what you pay for. And we're not just talking about watering a veggie garden or something like that. We're talking about watering something that you truly truly love, that you've put a lot of time and effort into, that you're making sure this thing's going to live forever, outlast time. So spending that couple of extra bucks, you always get the best that you possibly can when it comes to bonsai, but don't fall into the trap. Go visit a proper water shop. We've got them around the place where they are specialists in it. You don't necessarily need to buy through them, but I'd go to them for advice any day of the week. This is what I want. I want reliability. I want the best backup system. How does it kick into place if something goes wrong? What happens if, the Wi-Fi dies? What happens if, whatever. Just do the research, spend the time. Don't fall into the trap, the all too common trap that you pay the ultimate price for it, or your trees do. I apologise for that rant in the last section of the podcast, but it is something that I get passionate about for good reason, because been there, done that. Heard so many stories. I come across so many bonsai people that have the same tale to tell in one shape or another, or they know someone that's been through it. But the common mistake just gets repeated over and over and over. So my advice is reach out. I'm happy to. If you go back to earlier podcasts, I talk about it. But if you're looking at setting up a watering system and you want 2 cents worth, and you want to try and avoid some common traps, then please just reach out to me in any way that you possibly can. Anyway, decandling season is upon us. As we get closer and closer to Christmas, for me, for us in Australia, in the southern hemisphere, it's decandling time for your black pines. And red pines. If you love pines, then this is a really good time of year. And I've been banging into it, and I do it. I work around some key dates in my head when I have to do things, but I've got to be realistic with that too, in that I have to factor in availability for me, and if I've got other things on, which I definitely do at this time, and I can't be with my trees that need to be decandled. One little trick that I use, or one methodology that I use, is to decandle slightly earlier than slightly later. So let's say, I want to target decandling on my mid-size black pines, and that date in my head is the 10th of December. That's my ultimate date. But I look at my calendar and go, okay, well, that day I'm out working all day. Next day I've got something on, I need to be somewhere else, whatever. And I think actually, I can't really get into that proper decandling until about the 13th. So it's like, okay, well, I'm sure 3 days might be okay, but to be safe, I will always decandle prior to the 10th. So what that means is decandling slightly earlier means that the growing period the tree's got to produce the new buds, the new candles that I want to have grow, the new growth, the second flush of growth that I'm inflicting on the tree, it means it's got slightly longer to grow. And slightly longer means a slightly longer internode, slightly longer needles, which is okay, because the flip side of the coin is that I do it a little bit too late. And let's say it gets to the 13th and something else happens in life and I can't do it till the 14th, 15th. And suddenly the date's getting pushed further and further, not just for that pine that I've got in my mind. It's like every other pine behind that as well. So the stuff that I was then going to be decandling on the 13th of December suddenly gets pushed back because I don't have the time to do it. And the stuff that was then for the 15th gets pushed back to the 20th. And I've got this snowball effect where so many pines are affected because I can't decandle them on the date that I've got in my head. So the longer they get left, the shorter the period they've got to grow, which means ultimately shorter needles. And for me, I know, and for everybody listening, you've got to understand that, we all love short needles on our pines, but they need to be a certain length for the tree to be able to be strong enough. So if you decandle far too late and your needles end up way too small on your tree, then you're probably on a hiding to nothing the following year. It'll look great this year, look fantastic, but then when spring comes around next year, you might find that the buds don't grow quite as well as what they should. And, it comes back to that timing of decandling. So for me, I always try and decandle slightly earlier than slightly later. And with that too, part of the reason for this being discussed in the podcast, because it is something which is very common for a lot of people that listen to the podcast. And, anyone that knows me and has had anything to do with Bonsai Matsu knows that I love my black pines. It's part of the primary reason that I initially chose to go to Japan and do my study and spend time at IGN, because, they've got a really strong, solid base in Japanese black pines, and that's what I wanted to know. So, I love everything. I love natives, and I'm a bonsai lover of all kinds, but black pines have a special place for me. So I really want to talk about the technique and the 1%ers, how it all makes such a big difference at this time of the year. When you're decandling, tweezers in my dominant hand, scissors in my non-dominant hand. Use the tweezers to manipulate the candle that I'm going to be cutting off, to make sure that my cut is square. Make sure it's nice and flush across the candle that you're cutting, and don't have it where it's longer on one side and shorter on the other. Make sure that technique is absolutely bang on. Make sure that you're thorough with decandling the areas that you want to. Make sure that you're leaving alone the little needle buds that haven't grown very much, the weaker areas of the tree. Make sure that your technique for it is absolutely spot on. You get one chance to decandle per year, and this is the reminder that the 1% that we do with our decandling, so not only the timing of the decandling, but the actual process of the decandling needs to be perfect. Make sure your scissors aren't pushing too far through past the candle, because you'll cut the old needles that are sticking up on the other side of it as well. So it's the technique for me is, dominant hand tweezers, non-dominant hand scissors. Make sure your scissors are nice and sharp. Make sure they're cleaned regularly, because the more of these candles that you're cutting, the more sap build-up you're going to get, the less clean that cut's going to be made on the candles. So keep cleaning your scissors. It might be 2 or 3 times throughout decandling a large black pine. And get in there, make sure that your cuts, scissors closed, go in, touch the stem of the black pine, and open the scissors, slide just past the candle that you want to cut, and then cut the candle nicely. Use your tweezers to take that candle and throw it away, so it doesn't foul and stay around the tree once you've cut it off. I always work in quadrants when I'm doing it as well, so don't look at the whole tree and jump around left, right, all over the place, because you'll miss things. Start at the top of the tree, work your way down, and pick just a section. Start with one branch and just decandle that whole branch. Make sure you've done it thoroughly, then move on to the next one. I talk about using like a blinker system where you don't look further than the area that you're working, just so you can make sure you do it absolutely thoroughly. I work from the outside of the pad in, so don't start from the furthest point in, because you'll be getting spiked left, right and centre and breaking needles. So I always start from the outside, and you'll find that as you go through and start the decandling and working your way towards the centre, because you're cutting out those candles along the way, the foliage mass gets less and less and less, and it's a lot easier to work from the outside into the centre of the pad, and from the periphery working your way in, than it is to start from the inside and work your way back. If you start getting spiked, if you find that it's uncomfortable, if you find your scissor hand in the non-dominant hand is getting manipulated and twisted around, then you're not doing enough with the tweezers to manipulate that candle. So all you do is just hold the scissors in your non-dominant hand and just open, close, open, close. Keep your scissors sharp, keep them clean, and decandle thoroughly if you're going to do it. Don't leave it too late. That's the best advice that I can give you. Alright, so in the podcast, over the last 5 great years of this podcast, I've talked about a lot of things. Lots of different facets about patience, about planning. I'm a big one on planning for the trees. I've talked about taking action as well. I've talked about when's the right time to do something. And I want to throw into that mix that holding off for later is okay as part of the planning. But it's specific to a tree that I decandled the other day. I thought that's an interesting one. And so I went back through my thought process on working on this tree, and it was a black pine that I'd I'd put together for a demo for a bonsai club, and it's been with me developing for years and years now, and it's lovely. It's really nice. Got beautiful bark, got beautiful quality. Really happy with it. I've shared photos of it on socials and whatever else. So some people may know the tree, some people may not. Doesn't really matter. The point with it was that up near the apex of the tree, there was a thick branch that I'd grabbed, and I'd raffiaed and I'd bent right the way down. It was a really nice filler branch for the back of the tree, for the depth branch of the tree around the apex, and where this thick branch was, where it's growing, it's there's not much in that area. So if I didn't have it, it would create this really bald spot, but it's too thick. And when I decanted it, I looked and I thought, I bloody hate it. Like I really don't like it because, you go back to, I think it's almost episode 1 of the podcast, or maybe 2 in season 1. I talk about something called good structure is good bonsai, and that is paramount. That is tattooed across my chest. But it's also okay not to. I'm here to reassure you that if you don't have perfect structure on your bonsai, you don't need to sacrifice being happy with your tree just to fulfill the need of having good structure. All right. So this tree, that's why I thought it's actually timely to talk about it, because I find that, in life, in a lot of circumstances, people can get very high and mighty and look down their snout at people and, do as I say, not as I do sort of rubbish. And I don't believe in that. I'm an open book. Pretty much what you see is what you get. Well, I hope that's how I am. That's how I feel I am. And I want to make it, I suppose, relatable to everybody that, what I do is, and I've got lovely trees. I love them, and I get a lot of personal enjoyment out of them. But are they perfect when you get up under the kilt and have a look and see what the complete structure is? No, definitely not. Do I aim for perfection? 100%. I do, hand on heart. I aim to make them absolutely as perfect as I possibly can. And this tree that came across when I was decandling it, it's quite a large tree. Looks nice, love it. Really becoming a cracking bonsai. But my thought process was, I can cut this branch off at a later time. All right, my 100% have in my head that I'm going to remove this big fat branch at some point in the future, and as part of my planning process, I'm growing all these other little branches around that area that once they get to the point of being able to fill the void, this big branch is going to be the first thing I knock off. And I can't wait. I'm going to celebrate it. I'm going to take photos of it, and I'm probably not going to share it with anyone, but I'm going to be really happy because the plan for, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, whatever it's going to be, till I can reach this target in my head of a more perfect bonsai, a better structure on that bonsai. It's well worth the effort for me, but I'm not personally willing to sacrifice my satisfaction of looking at that tree going, geez, that's a really nice tree, for the sake that I'd have a better structured bonsai by cutting out this bigger branch. Where I would remove that branch earlier is if it's doing damage. All right, so let's say that big branch there is growing over the top of another branch and shadowing a better branch that's down lower, then I would have to do something about it. I would take action. I wouldn't leave it if that's the case. If that branch was coming from the spot where other branches were coming from and it was thickening, then I would take action for it as well. I suppose I just really want to let you know that if you don't have perfect structure on your trees and you've got a plan in place to improve things and change them and make them better, then sometimes it's okay just to hold off, just to leave it, As long as it's not, like I said, as long as it's not doing damage, as long as it's not preventing something else from developing, then it's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. Look, I'll go back to my reason for doing bonsai. It's to put a smile on my face. It's to make me happy. It's to give me something that I love. It's not to be competitive. It's not to create a living for myself. They're all other things that I get out of it as well. But my primary reason for doing bonsai, and what everybody listening to this podcast, I encourage you to keep the focus on, is enjoyment. We love our trees. We love spending time with them. We love developing. We love growing them. We love seeing them go through their seasons. We love every single aspect about them, choosing pots, creating deadwood, whatever it is. I think that's, as long as that's your primary focus, then it's okay to sort of sacrifice perfection to get there, but not at the cost of something else. If you're holding off doing something and it's going to set your tree back longer term, then you need to take action. But that's not what this part of the podcast is about. This section of the podcast is to say, put my arm around your shoulder and say, you know what, it's okay. Just enjoy it. No one's going to judge it. This is a non-judgmental environment. If you want my opinion on something, you want to talk to me, you want that warm reassurance that you're on track, reach out, please, because I'm here. We're in this together. And I certainly, on my bench, when I look at my trees, are they at that perfection point yet? No, they're not. Are they getting there? Yep. Have I got a plan for them? 100% I do. Will I take action at the right time? My oath I will, and I will make it the best bonsai that it can possibly be. Righto, folks. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I do truly appreciate everybody that listens, everyone that reaches out. I'm so glad to a bit of feedback from the last podcast. I'm so glad that the Australian Natives section was well received, and I do love them. If you haven't got one, I know Christmas is on the way. Maybe see if Santa can chuck a few under the tree for you along the way. You don't need to spend a fortune on them, but yeah, just dabble your toe, dip your toe in the water, and see how you go with it. And with Christmas coming too, I'm really looking forward to it. I've got some bonsai magazines that I haven't had a chance to read yet. I'm looking forward to putting my feet up and having a read of those. I've got tree books to read, which is really exciting. You can't tell I'm smiling from ear to ear. I've got a Suiseki magazine book to read as well to learn about. I'm gonna learn more about that part of the art that we're involved with. There's definitely some waves to catch, and there's a few quite cheeky owls to have along the way as well. So I'm looking forward to it. I know the warm weather sort of is a bit daunting as we head towards this part of the summer. But planning is key. Doing the best you possibly can is the best you possibly can. You can't do more than that. So I think that we just take a nice deep breath and we embrace it, and we keep rolling forward with it, and just make sure that you're keeping an eye. I've seen lots of issues lately with the trees, with caterpillars and fungal issues that are ramping up at the moment around my area with the humidity and wet that we've had. And it seems to be every tree that's coming into the workshop at the moment has some sort of an issue. So stay on top of it. However you're looking after it, make sure that you're on the front foot. Don't leave it till it's too late. It's an important time of year to be prepared. So thank you for listening. Thank you, subscribers. I love you, buddy, deeply. I really appreciate everything that you do. So thank you again. I'm looking forward to the next episode of the podcast. There's a lot of great stuff that's going to wrap up before this year is done in the next few weeks. So please keep listening in and reach out if I can help you with anything. You know the way to do it. Scott@bonsaimatsu.com or via the socials is the way to go. Spend time with your trees, please. It's an important time. It's a lovely time. If you're decandling, get into it. If you're not decandling, just give them a cuddle. Do a walk past, have a cup of tea in the morning and give them a cuddle, because it's time that you'll spend well. I guarantee it. You'll feel $1 million afterwards. All right. Until next time, thank you for listening. Happy bonsai.